That's the problem with this industry. There's too many guys that don't know how to size equipment, how to do it right. They're swapping boxes. That's the big thing. They just want to swap boxes. Or they think throwing a bigger unit in is going to fix all the customers' problems. They think it's a silver bullet. Customers also think it's a silver bullet. They think a new system is going to fix problems. That's one reason why I do the testing, because you'll find out later if you just swapped a box and didn't do anything, the testing, customers go, well, that didn't fix my living room. It's still hot and still cold. And you're like, you didn't tell me that it was a problem. Please, you gotta point me when there's an issue. That's why you ask those questions. But if I do the testing, it usually pops out. And like I said, I've done the testing. It sells systems and it does cement stuff.
Hey everyone, we've got an awesome episode for you today. It's with Mitch Bailey, owner of Air Heroes out in California. Mitch has been in HVAC his entire life. He's second generation HVAC owner. He took over the business from his dad, and he tells us about his multi-decade arc and all the stuff he learned along the way. We've been talking a lot about our article, How to Stop Competing on Price and How to Win on Trust. And Mitch is a perfect example of basically everything we have in our trust checklist. You can hear the story of what he was doing, what he learned, why he pivoted his business, and why he sleeps better at night now. So it's a great episode to listen to. And if you want or are intrigued, you can download our trust checklist. The link is in the show notes, and it gives you a bulleted point list of all the things that we've seen for folks who win with homeowners on trust, and that lets them charge the margins they want and need to run a sustainable, enjoyable business. So check that out. With that, let's get on to the show. Hi, and welcome to the Heat Pump Podcast. I'm Ed Smith.
And I'm Eric Fitz. We are co-founders of Amply Energy.
Today, we are delighted to have Mitch Bailey of Bailey's Air Heroes out in California with us. Welcome, Mitch.
Well, thanks for having me.
Mitch just won the much coveted Jim Davis Technical Excellence Award from the National Comfort Institute, which is much coveted because it was the first time they gave it, right, Mitch?
Yes.
Well, congratulations. It sounds like it was very well deserved, and we're looking forward to digging into your technical expertise because you're a trainer, you're a business owner, and you're very involved in California's switch to all electric homes. I think that's the trifecta of who we like to talk to. So we're excited to dig in with you here. First question. So you're a long time, you sort of grew up in the trade, right? You started as an apprentice in your dad's company in 1976. If we just go back there, what was that like growing up in HVAC then as an apprentice and learning how the trade was at that time?
I was 15 at the time, so I couldn't even drive. In fact, my mom used to pick me up, and at the time my father had taken on a subdivision, and so the guy that he was using kind of flaked on him, so I was picked up after school, dropped off on the job site, and ran duck till the sun went down, and then was picked up, rinse and repeat every day, did that for the whole school year. I also went on him with service calls. In the summertime, I worked for him full time, and then on weekends, of course, and after hours. And it wasn't, back then, it was expected for you to do that. You're the kid, you're the son, so it's what you had to do. It wasn't like I was something I wanted to do. I actually wanted to be either a scientist or an architect, one of the two. That's what I was aiming for. But I ended up in this business instead, so that's been a good business. I really like it. And the stuff that the science portion of it, because I was really heavy on science. If anybody's getting in the HVAC business, it's a really heavy science profession. You just don't realize it because it looks like it's a hands-on kind of tool trade kind of thing, like get your hands dirty, micro dirty jobs kind of thing. And it is, but it's also very heavy on science. And so I think that gives me a good basis for me to do this is overall. But when I got a truck, when I was 16, when I turned 16, my dad gave me a truck. It wasn't because I turned 16, it was so I could get to the job site.
That's
amazing.
Awesome.
And tell us a little bit more from there. You said you were working for your dad. Can you give us a little more of the arc of your background?
So he went to school for this. This is the thing. So he went to school for it. I didn't. I kind of learned by osmosis, working with guys and working with him and going on jobs. The biggest difference was when I got thrown out into the mix of it and I started doing service calls and stuff, I'd run into a problem and I'd come back to him and I said, Dad, I can't fix this. I don't know what's going on. And he'd say, Well, here, hang on, I'll help you. You reach behind him, he'd grab the book of the day, which was Doolin's Bible, and he'd say, here, read the book I had to. So I'd study on it that night, then I'd go out and fix the unit. And that's how I learned to do it. Now, that changed later on because we were very fortunate in California here. We have a PG&E. They take a little bit, it's called a public surcharge, out of everybody's bill to go for rebates, incentives, weatherization, and training. They decided to take a lot of that money and put it in training. They built a facility in Stockton off of Universal and West Lane that actually had a house. And they would do BPI and NGAT training in that house. They also did training. They were free classes to contractors, techs, anybody that wanted to take the classes. And it was all in HVAC stuff. That's where I learned about RightSoft is there. That's where I learned a lot of the other stuff because we also were doing PG&E homes as the years progressed. And to get the incentive, you had to do a duct test and you had to do certain other things that the system had to have so that it would qualify for the incentives, for the PG&E incentives. So did a lot of training that way. I did a plethora of classes. I don't know if Rick Chitwood. You ever heard of Rick Chitwood? Oh no. Gosh. He's a home performance guru. In fact, you guys should probably look him up and see if he would want to be on the podcast because the classes he gives, he was building 4,000 square foot houses that ran on a heat pump. This is back in the 80s that, and the 90s, early 90s, that were like a 1.5 ton system. He was building houses, Rick Chitwood. Really good. He was a huge performance kind of guy. You guys have entered Larry Waters, right?
Yeah, we just did.
Yeah. So he worked with Rick for a little bit too, I believe.
Oh, cool.
He did some stuff with him. So, yeah.
Okay.
But he was
he was a great interview.
But his thing was building a house that you could build a house that was 3,000 or 4,000 square feet and run it off a 1.5 ton air conditioner. And this was up in Reading and it gets hot. I mean, an average summer day up there is like 110. So, and he'd run it off a 1.5 ton air conditioner. He'd just build a very tight home. He'd fix all that stuff and then just do his ducts and everything correctly. And he was very big on the science end of it. So
that's cool. And you took over the business in 93?
1992, actually. I purchased it from my dad. I purchased the company from my dad. Yeah.
Let's get a little bit more into your current business, Air Heroes. You've got a real focus on home performance and measuring results. What kind of got you moving in that direction? And when did you kind of make that switch? Or have you always kind of been doing it that way?
Yeah, well, let me take a step back. My dad was really heavy in refrigeration because he went to school for this. He did 20 years in the military, retired in 1967, went to school for HVAC. He had opened his own company in Texas. This was back in the early 70s or late 60s. We then moved back. We moved to California because he was a Dust Bowl kid and went to the military from here. And so we moved back here where you could swing a dead cat in this town and hit a Bailey back then. So it was all his relatives. He had like 12 brothers and sisters. And so we moved back here. He worked for other companies. Then he owned his own company in 1976. And when he did that, he was heavy into refrigeration because the company he worked for beforehand, he'd built the company from a one-man. It was Cox's Refrigeration. He built it from one man to 6 guys. And the owner decided to hire a guy out of college to be the service manager. My dad said, I guess you don't need me. And he left. All those customers migrated to my dad. And my dad didn't solicit one of them. They all just came to him because they'd find out he wasn't working for Cox's anymore. And then they looked him up on the yellow pages back then was the thing. And there was his company. So they brought him in. He brought all those people in. So we were really having refrigeration. We used to do all the Denny's, all the Taco Bells, all the Quick Stops, all the mom and pop stores, all the Burger Kings, Taco Bells. You named it. We did it back in the day. So I kind of cut my teeth on that stuff. The new construction phase of his company, though, took off. And for years, we were doing 500 to 2,000 homes a year, depending on the year. In some instances, we had 60, 70 people working for the company. I was just an employee. But then in about 84, 85, I ended up taking over, becoming the new construction / sheet metal department manager. Managed it from then. I'm also kind of an early adopter. I wanted to switch to computers and other things, and my dad was kind of dead set against it. So after work, I would do Title 24s for contractors in the area. And I bought a computer, a 1086 computer. At the time, that had a 20 megabyte hard drive, which was considered huge. And it used real floppy drives. It had floppy disks. I was DOS based. I did MicroPass, and that's where I learned a little bit more about the building science and stuff, because MicroPass, you had to really learn what you were doing and how you were doing it. The computers were a lot slower today. Back then, if you would hit the button to do the calculation and you could go to lunch, you could be gone, it'd take an hour sometimes to do the calculation. And then if it made a mistake, it would tell you had to go back, fix it, and then hit the button again and wait another hour. Years later, about 20 years later, we ended up starting doing Title 24s again for customers, for the builders. When I did that, the computer now with the calculation so fast, by the time you're done pushing the button, it was done. So I learned all that science stuff back then, but we did heat pumps also back in the day. So I'm gonna jump out there on this one. A lot of the homes when I first started, they were doing heat pumps. Heat pumps was what architects, engineers spec'd in homes. And so we were doing a lot of heat pumps. Probably half of the homes we were doing heat pumps. Problem is, here in the valley, we have a Thule fog that develops. We have an inversion layer that comes in. We have cold air below, warm air aloft, and it just kind of like a lid on a pot just holds it in there. And at the time, we used to have a lot of moisture, so we get this fog that would never end. It was always cold temperatures, very moist. The units were 100% on. They would go into defrost. Had to put heat strips in all the units. And people just hated them. They hated heat pumps because their bills were high. They were uncomfortable because they were always going into defrost. This was such as 84. They built lens crafters here in Modesto, and we did the lens crafters. They had 3 5-ton heat pumps on the roof. The mechanical engineer was a lady out of Southern California, and I called her and I said, hey, you don't have any heat strips in these heat pumps. She goes, you don't need them. You're in climate zone 12. I said, no, you don't understand, lady. We get this Thule fog. And I go, they're going to be in defrost. They need heat strips. And she insisted we didn't do them. Well, summer rolls around, everything worked fine, and then winter came along, and the manager said, hey, we can't get the building above 55 degrees. Well, they were all in defrost and no heat strips. So we ended up putting heat strips in all of them. The biggest problem with that was the heat strips we put in those units, they didn't have power coming to the building, so it ended up costing them a fortune to run power into the building to service the heat strips alone, because we were putting 20 kW on those 5 tons. Today, if I was to change those heat pumps out, I wouldn't put heat strips in any of them. We don't need them. 2 reasons. One, we have stages or we have variable speed. And the other reason is the climate has changed. Now, it's not all climate. I made a video on this. It has to do with how they irrigate the valley. We don't have the moisture that's tied up in the soil. So we don't get that Thule fog like we used to get. We used to get a really bad Thule fog. Don't have it. We get it occasionally, but with the variable speed, they're able to defrost in between there. So, and then after I became the manager, company continued to grow. I took over in 92. I dumped all of the refrigeration. I stopped doing I did commercial, but it was just AC stuff and heating, because I hated the hours. I hated when a walk-in box for a Denny's went down. I was up at 2:00 in the morning fixing a walk-in box, and the hours kind of sucked. So I gave that up. And then the clientele that we dealt with, they changed hands. A lot of the businesses have changed hands, and they weren't willing to spend the money. They just didn't want to spend the money to fix the stuff. They wanted to nickel and dime it. There was a better profit in new construction and add-on replacement service work. So we switched to that. After we went from that new construction to, in 2008, 2009, when the economy turned down, our Great Recession, we ended up losing about $300,000 to builders that went bankrupt on us, didn't pay us. So company survived it, but I switched my model 2010 to just all add-on replacement service work. Higher margins. My margins were running around 6% to 3% for new construction. But it was a lot of work. So we were at one point, we were doing $5 million a year, but I wasn't making much money. So we switched from new construction to add-on replacement service. That runs about a 30% margin typically for most of the stuff we do, which was more profitable. But that's good for the business because it keeps us open and allows us to continue to operate. And hopefully into the next 10, 15 years before I retire.
Team same size since that switch, or did you kind of decrease the team size a bit, more profitable?
So we downsized. We went from 40, 50 people down to about 16. Today we're running about 12. And it varies. I haven't grown the business. I've watched a lot of your stuff, and a lot of guys are all about growing the business. There's just starting out. I'm comfortable where I'm at, really. I don't need to grow it. It's a good business. Since we've built up clientele over the years, we have about probably a database of about 30, 40,000 customers, but we have probably about 3,000 just our straight maintenance customers. And I say real maintenance, not the $59 special going to come out and try to sell you a new system. We've got real customers that we go out twice a year, service their systems. And some of those people have been with us for 40 years. We've replaced their systems a couple of times over the years.
We do have a lot of people who come on and talk about growth, but frankly, it's nice to hear from folks who just have a business they like running. There's a line I think about a lot, which is, how do you build a business you don't grow to hate? Which we think about a lot about at Amply. Like, I want to enjoy running this 10, 15 years down the road. And so having it kind of mesh with your vision, your lifestyle, your mission, all that stuff, I think is super important. And growth at all costs is not everyone's cup of tea.
Right. So like I said, I'm heavy into the sciences. You ever heard of the analysis machine? It came out around 2000. It was
the
actually
analysis machine?
Analysis.
The analysis machine?
E-analysis with a big E. Analysis.
E-analysis. Oh, E-analysis. No.
Yeah, no. E-analysis, not analysis, E-analysis. Well, the analysis machine was at the time we're doing a lot of new construction, and there's new construction has what they call kitchen sink lawsuits. There's a plethora of kitchen sink lawsuits. So, in fact, after I dropped doing heating, we changed the entities. We actually formed a new corporation and everything because our general counsel said, because I was getting sued every day. I had a new lawsuit from a subdivision we did 10 years ago because they'd filed a lawsuit on the 10th year, 12th month, last day of the year with 2,000 Jane Does and John Does to be filled in later by the contractors that did the work. We ended up having to defunct that company and sunset it, and then so we could get out from underneath all the liability that we had for doing those houses, even though we did nothing wrong. And I mean, we've been involved in I'd gone to what they call destructive testing, where you go out to a home in a subdivision and they'll have all the attorneys there and they'll be cutting holes and they'll count how many nails are in the sheetrock. And if there's only 6 and there's supposed to be 10, then they'll go through the whole subdivision and say, well, there's supposed to be 8. This is going to cost $300,000 to fix and everything else. And it's all just to get money out of the builder, and he countersues all the subs. So we're a subcontractor. We're brought into the lawsuit. One set of houses we were doing, the attorneys, they're going through, and the homeowner, and they're doing destructive testing. I'm standing there, and we had nothing wrong in this house. We had nothing wrong in any of the homes we were doing. So I'm standing there next to the homeowner, and I said, so what's wrong with your HVAC? And the guy, before his attorney could say, don't answer that, he goes, nothing. And they jumped all over me. You can't ask that question and all stuff to me. And I said, well, what am I doing here? This is stupid. We haven't done anything wrong. Our system works great. And so we'd get named in these lawsuits. I'd have to defend them. My insurance would have to pay it off. So when we changed our business model over from new construction to add-on replacement, I had bought the analysis machine back in 2000 to help defend myself if there was a problem. Because basically what it was think of Measure Quick, but with flow hoods that you attach to the system, and it would, via computer, and you'd take all the readings, and it would tell you the SEER rating of the equipment, if it was charged correctly, the airflow, the whole 9 yards, and it would give a printout, and I could take that and say, okay, if we end up in court, here it is. I was doing that back in 2000. When I started switching 2010 over, I decided I wasn't using the analysis machine anymore, but I had decided to do it, and that some of the tools became available to do it, flow hoods and stuff like that. We've always owned flow hoods, but it became where I was going to do the load calculation on a house. If I went into it, I was going to compare it to what it should be. I was going to tell the customer what they needed to do to fix it, and then give them the options of what they want to do. And not all customers want to do everything. Sometimes you go in and you say, yeah, you need insulation, and they'll go, I think it's fine. I'm not going to worry about it. And then I try to show them where they can fix that kind of thing. But then a lot of times they just go, no, it doesn't work for me. So my budget only allows this. So we fix what we can In some cases, we can fix all of it. Some people are willing to go that extra mile and do that kind of stuff.
Mitch, there's so many interesting nuggets you touched on and all the different areas you just discussed. I want to circle back to a couple of them. So one, it sounds like the trigger really for you going from new construction to retrofit, add-on replacement business model. One, sounds like the liability issue was a big deal, but ultimately there are higher margins. Can you just talk a bit more about like why there are higher margins in the retrofit business model versus the new construction? And you started getting into these aspects of how you're diagnosing the home. Like, I'd love to hear more about that as well.
Sure. When it comes to the new construction, it is a wholesale market. Builders expect a discount. Builders don't pay as much. Builders hold your money longer. You get paid over a period of time. I start a house at frame stage, take it through frame to drywall, set the equipment, the finish. You get paid in stages. And we tried to make it to where we got paid our profit up front in case the builder went under. So we would add more money in the up front end of it. That didn't work at the end because they just didn't pay us. So it just didn't work. The other thing is too, when you're doing new construction, we were getting $200,000, $300,000 checks from builders. If a builder got sideways with you, that could hurt your company a lot because they decided not to. So the add-on replacement service end is a retail market. I'm talking to the end user. I'm talking to the builder, not the end user. How I'm dealing with the end user, I'm dealing with the person that's actually makes the decisions, that's going to live in the house. Okay. Builder's not living in that house. They're selling it. And so they're motivated by profit. The customer, the people that live in the house, they're motivated by comfort and whether it's going to cost them a fortune to run this system. So it's a retail market. It's a higher profit margin because of that. It's because of that ability to switch there. It's also one customer at a time. So if a guy owes me $20,000 and he decides not to pay me, it's not going to put my company under. Recently, we were doing some work for Gallo. I don't know if you heard of Gallo Wines. Yeah.
Yeah, EJ Gallo wine.
EJ Gallo Wines.
Yeah.
Ernest and Julio Gallo. So EJ Gallo, they have what they call G3, which is their one branch of their company. And they had a bad compressor on a 50-ton unit, and we ended up changing it out. And because we were a Trane dealer, and it was through Trane that they did it. So the unit went down again after we changed it out, and they had this other company did all their work. The guy came in and did nothing but badmouth my company and how we screwed everything up. But then I sent my service manager, Bob, over there, and in 20 minutes he had the unit up and running. It was another problem with the same unit, but it had nothing to do with what we had done. They went nuts. They go, "We want you to do all our work." The guy that run that department, and so that would have been a $3 or $4 million contract. And Bob came to me and says, "Do you want to do it?" And I said, "Nah, done the commercial stuff before, and I don't want to get sideways with Ernest and Julio and not get paid." So that would put the company under. So we decided to pass. And so sometimes that's one of the hardest decisions that any contractor has to make, is to pass work on work, not to take it. And that's one of the things that as you become more and more into the business, you find those customers that, man, I wish I hadn't taken that customer. And that's always a regret. In the back of your mind, the guys are always thinking, I got to have that job. An example is we used to do a builder, Florsheim Homes. And when I first started with him, he was doing small subdivisions. You ever heard of Florsheim Shoes? That's the two grandsons. Florsheim Shoes they used to be a big brand of shoes used to be in all the malls and stuff. But their granddad had the contract with the military for their insoles to make all the shoes for them. So they were millionaires. They were $300 million between the two brothers, Dave and Bob. But I bid their work for years, never got their work. Now one day, that little 40-house subdivision in Modesto, they were doing, and I bid it. Dave Florsheim called me. He said, "Come in my office. Come down here. I want to talk to you." I get to his office and I sat down. I said, "Dave, how you doing?" And I'm looking at his office. It's beautiful. It's got offices bigger than like 3 of my offices. And he had paintings on the wall. It's probably worth more than my truck. And so I'm talking to him and he's like, "Mitch, I've heard good things about your company. I really want to use you, but I got a problem." And I said, "What's that, Dave?" And he goes, "You're $150 high a house." And this was a 40-house subdivision. So I said, "Well, Dave, my first price and my best price, that never come off on my new construction stuff." And he says, "Well, can you meet me halfway, $75? And I said, "No." He says, "Okay, $50. I said, no. So he said, okay, $25. No. And he goes, $5. That's all I'm asking. And I said, I almost reached in my pocket and pulled out $200. Said, David, if you need the money that bad, here's $200. But I didn't. I kept my mouth shut. Got the contract, did his work halfway through the project. Well, had about 5 houses we were going to set the equipment on. And I was walking the project, and he come running up to me, and he goes, hey, just let me know when you want me to write a check to your supplier for the equipment. And I said, what the hell are you talking about? He goes, well, all the other guys, I've had to write a check to their supplier. I said, look, Dave, I have a $250,000 line of credit with my supplier. How about I set the equipment, buy it, set it, and then you just pay me? Because all the other companies were insolvent. I found out later that every company he had used was cheap. He was the cheapest guy, and that guy always went under, and it always cost him money. So for years we did his work, and at one point we're actually doing like 6 subdivisions with him, but he hated my guts because I never gave him an inch whenever just my way. I just didn't do that. And so when he finally fired us, at that point in time, I was thinking I have to have his work to continue to operate. But when he fired me, back then we had pagers. This is in the 90s. So I had a pager after I got fired. I'd have to take the pager off my hip and look at it to make sure it was still working because it wasn't going off because there was nothing that I had to do for Florsheim anymore. So I realized at that point, I don't need all this grief that comes along with doing new construction and stuff. The add-on replacement servicing has its own problems, but not near as we had with new construction. It is a retail market. It's not a wholesale market.
In my mind, I'm like fist pumping in the air. We just put out an article that we called Stop Competing on Price, Start Winning on Trust. And we break down kind of the matrix of different types of business models. And I think one of the most controversial things that we had in there, because we're on episode 40 to 50 of this podcast, and we kept hearing folks who had a crystal clear view of who was and who was not their customer. And that was different to me than at this point I've done, 1,000, sales calls for Amply and met different HVAC entrepreneurs. And there's 2 mentalities. There's folks who every lead must be won. And if it's not, it kills me. And there's another one which is I like this kind of customer. And I say no. To hear you say with such calm and nights of good sleep behind you, that kind of customer was not for me.
I was that guy 20 years ago, though. I was the guy 30 years ago. I was the guy that thought that you needed every job.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I'd lose jobs, I would ask what I do. But even toward the end, I was asking when I got a job, what did I do wrong? What did I leave off the table? How much money did I leave on the table? And it got to the point
buyer's
where
remorse.
Yeah, well, no.
The equivalent of buyer's remorse. When you get the bid on the house and you win, you're like, crap, I bid too much.
So years ago, I did a Honeywell. So Honeywell sold the analysis machine, but they bought it out for another guy. Okay. And they wanted us to use that in our service department. I wanted to use it to keep me out of court. When I took a business course, actually, Honeywell paid for me. They sent me to Florida. It was called Build a Better Business. And the guy he did new construction. And the way he did it is he built himself a sales office. And he would have the homeowners buying subdivision houses come in or custom homes, and he would go over their options because the builder, they're not going to pay for the highest efficiency or any of the other stuff. We could walk a customer in, show them this is what this is paid for by the builder, but this is your option. And then they could buy an upgraded unit, and we would make money on that, very good profits on that stuff, more than 50% margin on all that stuff. And the builder would make money on it because he would just take our price and just double it, and then he'd just keep the difference. After I took that, as soon as I took that course, Build a Better Business, I went ahead and I knocked out a wall in an office, turned it into my sales room. I had, with the time, we're doing 3 different brands of equipment: Goodman, Amana, Lennox, and Rheem. And so they had different levels of equipment. We'd have the unit, and I used 3 different brands at the time because we're doing so much subdivision work. The manufacturer would sometimes run out of equipment in summertime, so I could switch them if I needed to. I could go, okay, you're not getting Lennox, you're going to get a Rheem. And it was the deal with all the builders. What ended up happening is customer would come in, and I have a unit running, and they'd meet with me. And the unit would be like the base unit, and it would just be going, yeah, 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 yeah. And the customer would walk in and to have to yell as I'm talking to them, say, yeah, this is the unit. It's right in your backyard. This is the unit. And I would turn it off. And then there'd be another unit over here. And I said, this is our top of the line right here. And they walk over and I said, oh, by the way, it's running, because it was so quiet. And they'd go, wow, honey, we got to have that one. And so my first sale out of there was $26,000 in options for my first sale, plus what the builder was paying me to do the house. Now, we didn't make 26. Builder made 13,000 on that. So it was costing, so 13,000, but our profit margin was 50, 60% on all that stuff. So that was really would have kept me in the business, except for one thing. When the economy, home prices started climbing and going up, the builder found they didn't have to sell options. They got to the point, one guy was at the point where a customer would come in and said, I want to buy this house. And he'd raised his price on that house $5,000 last week. And the customer would come in, I want to buy the house, but I want to do this. And the builder would say, you're taking it as it is, or I'm selling to somebody else tomorrow or today. So what do you want to do? And the people would just, okay, not do the options. So the options kind of went away. The other thing that happened was people's budgets got squeezed to the point to where they couldn't afford all the options we would sell them. They'd come in and go, hey, we want that option. We want that upgrade for the air conditioner and the heating system to $5,000 and this air cleaner and this other product. But they couldn't afford it. The builder would even tell me at the end, says, you can't sell this customer a filter or they won't be able to qualify for the house. So they'd come in and I'd say, I can't sell you none of this stuff. I can show it to you. One guy canceled a front door that cost $8,000 on one builder because he said, honey, this makes more sense than that $8,000 door. And so the builder called me. He was livid. He goes, oh my God. He goes, if I have to pay for that door, Mitch, you're paying for it, not me. And I was like, I didn't make that decision. She did. Luckily, they were able to cancel the door. But yeah, so I would have stayed in new construction if I could have continued that. But my sales went from 26,000 to 12,000 to 10,000 to 3,000. I mean, literally $500. A customer come in and buy $500, and it was filtration and maybe a better bath fan, and that was it. It wasn't attainable because the builders found they could just take all the profits, more profit, without having to do anything. Just put it in their pocket.
I want to talk a bit more on the retrofit service side. A couple of things you've mentioned just about how there's so much more alignment with what you're offering and what a homeowner values. And that example on the new construction side where you're talking about like comparing the low end unit that's making a bunch of terrible outdoor units making a bunch of terrible sound. And then they hear what the higher performance unit, it's basically silent. Like that is really tangible. A homeowner can really understand that. You can sell that benefit. We know like a huge part of your business today is about measuring airflow and static pressures and system performance instead of just talking about sizing. Can you just spend a little more time? How have you figured out how to communicate the different things that you are doing for a given project in the retrofit application? How do you explain that to a homeowner and do that well?
Before that one, for the audience, would you paint a picture of what your process looks like today? Because I think we haven't totally gotten into it. And you're like an NCI trainer, a high performance contractor, like maybe even start one step earlier. Like, what does that mean to be a high performance contractor? How does your sales process differ? And then we can talk about how you communicate that value to a homeowner.
So I'm lucky in that I have they have what they call the QB2, Quality Bid Tier 2, from programs put together by Frontier Energy runs it here in the area through tech program. And what it is, again, part of that public surcharge money. They funded a program that's been going for 2 years now, and it'll go through 26, and then they're going to reevaluate. The only problem is they don't have enough participation. They actually made me a tier 3 contractor. They have a tier 1 and tier 2. And what that is we go in, we do a load calculation, we do a little bit of testing on tier 1, and they give me $350. We're a tier 2 contractor, so we do a little more testing, do a little more stuff, and they give me $700. Now, prior to that program, we did that testing, the exact same thing. I'd go into houses. And so our process was when we go into a home, what I'll tell the customer, I says, look, you've got a 3-ton currently, let's say. I don't know if it's the right size. I'm going to have to test your house to see where it's at. I got to test the infiltration. I got to do a load calculation. I'm going to have to test your airflow, and I'm going to have to see about duct leakage. And then I can evaluate it. I also bring a FLIR camera, so I go through their house so they can see it. I go in the attic. I put a stake in the insulation. I put it in there, and the stake's like 3 inches, 4 inches of insulation. And I said, that at code at the time when the house was built, and code today is here. Let's bring it up at least to R38. And the customer's like, oh, okay. And I call that, when I teach my classes, I call that my high-tech selling tool. I tell the guys, I'm giving these out in class. I'll bring insulation stakes. And I say, anybody want a free high-tech selling tool? And they'll go, yeah. And I'll hand out these insulation stakes. I'll tell them, so you show this to the customer, take a picture of it, bring it down to them, give them a price on the insulation. If you don't want to do insulation, let's say I'm a heat and air contractor, I don't want to do insulation. Make a deal with a local insulator, and you give them the depth of the insulation. They'll tell you what it'll cost to blow insulation. They just need the square footage of the attic, and you just add $300 for yourself. For us, we have 2 blow trucks, so we go and we blow our own insulation. I say we have 2 blow. We have a portable blow machine, and we have one that's truck mounted in a big 26-foot box fan. But the insulation's easy, quick money, but it does a lot of stuff because it makes the house warmer in the winter, cooler in the summer. It's going to make the unit cycle on and off less, so that's going to save wear and tear, and it's going to save energy and save money. So it's a win-win for everybody, and it's a simple thing to do. And again, like if you're a heat and air contractor and you don't want to do that, make a deal with the 8 local insulators. They'll be happy to come out and blow that for you. You just got to make the deal with them. But that process, when I go with the customer, I show them all these things and I tell them what we're going to do. Prior to the QB program, the Quality HVAC Residential Services Program, what we would do is we would put it in our price. And then when the customer said yes, we'd come out and do it. 2 years ago, I was driving to teach a class up in Tulare. My daughter called me and says, Dad, they got this program. It's called Quality HVAC Residential Services. They'll pay you $700 to do this test and give the customer a quote. And whether you get the job or not, you get paid $700. So we do it on every house we do now. So we go in, we're fortunate. Like I tell at the HVAC summit, I told the other contractors, don't be hating. I got this available and I use it. I take advantage of it because it was exactly what I do. I test in every house. I test out every house. And when I do the testing, I go as deep. I'm also on the ASHRAE 221 committee. I don't know if you guys know what the ASHRAE 221 is. So that is test in the field, the actual performance and capacity of equipment that's installed in residential systems and commercial. But we go in and we do the testing. And I had a simplified version that I was doing of that. I still do the simplified. I don't do the complete ASHRAE 221 and use their software. I use my own stuff. And then the other thing that we usually do is we will calculate for the customer how much it's going to cost, how much savings it's going to be compared to the cost. And in most cases, it will pay for itself, sometimes depending on the utility, within 10 years. So the system, just by replacing your system, it will pay for itself in 10 years. And we show the customer that. Does it close sales? It does. I got to say, because when I show this testing to any engineer, I get every engineer's house. I go to a guy that's an engineer. I've done 3 engineers in the last 2 months. And every time I went in there, they were like, they couldn't sign faster. One guy had 8 quotes, 8. And then he landed on me. And I wasn't the cheapest. I wasn't the most expensive either. I wasn't the cheapest, most expensive. He had a 4-ton unit in his house. 4-ton, okay? When I did the load calc, it came out to just over 3 tons. Same thing for the heating, just over 36,000 BTUs. And I told him, I said, look, if we go to R60 in the attic and you fix your infiltration, this will drop down to about a 2.5 ton. And I did the what ifs for him when I did it. He said, one guy told him you need a 5-ton on his house. And he says, no, this other guy says I need a 3. That's all I need. And that's what we ended up putting was a 3-ton. Just finished him. And he says, well, good luck. Call me when he's all done because it's not going to work. And that's the problem with this industry. There's too many guys that don't know how to size equipment, how to do it right. They're swapping boxes. That's the big thing. They just want to swap boxes. Or they think throwing a bigger unit in is going to fix all the customers' problems. They think it's a silver bullet. Customers also think it's a silver bullet. They think a new system is going to fix problems. That's one reason why I do the testing, because you'll find out later after if you just swapped a box and didn't do anything, the testing, customers go, well, that didn't fix my living room. It's still hot and still cold. And you're like, you didn't tell me that it was a problem. Please, you got to point me when there's an issue. That's why you ask those questions. But if I do the testing, it usually pops out. Sometimes when I do the testing, I'll go in a room and I'm testing it and I'll do the load calc. Before I even get done testing it, I know there's a problem in that room because they've got a portable air conditioner going out the window and they've got all the windows blacked out. And I said, does this room not cool very well? And they go, yeah, it's obvious you have a problem, dude. So we try to fix those things. And like I said, I've done the testing. It sells systems and it does cement stuff because, example, last year we did a customer toward the end of summer and he was a lawyer. And we ended up doing his house in Stockton. We got done doing it and everything. And May rolls around this year. It was like middle of May, and it was going to be 101 or 102 that day. And I get a text from him at 6:30 in the afternoon. And I'm like, oh, shoot, what's going on? And I start reading his text, and I was like, oh. He goes, I just want to thank you for all the good work and everything else. I just want to let you, it's 6:30 in the afternoon, and the unit just came on. It's 100 degrees outside. And I was like, fantastic. That's what the house is supposed to do. It's not supposed to run. And when it does, it's supposed to maintain temperatures and cost nothing to do it. So, and yes, he did everything: infiltration, insulation, new system, new ductwork, the whole 9 yards. He spent $50,000. So, but he had 2 systems. So
Can you go one click like, I totally get. So Eric's an engineer and I'm not. Eric would choose you all day long. How do you get that to land with a non-engineering customer? This is a hot topic for us. We're talking with Peter Trost over at Energy Circle a lot about it, because the technical sale can be intimidating to folks who don't understand it. So like, how do you make that testing land with a non-technical customer?
I've made a lot of videos. I've actually point the customers to videos a lot of the time. So, and that they're my videos, but if somebody else wanted to point them to my videos is fine too. The like and subscribe, by the way. So when I
what's the name of the channel? You got to plug that too, Mitch.
It's Mitchell Bailey. I didn't make up. I wasn't Potato Jet or Mr. Beast or any of that stuff. No, it was just my name. By the way, there's a rapper with the same name. That's not me. If you got to put in Mitchell Bailey HVAC and it'll pop up my beautiful mug, and then you subscribe to it. And it's an old picture. That's a 25-year-old pic. Years ago, I took that pic. But when you're with a customer, that's another problem with our business. We tend to start talking SEER. We start talking tonnage. And I ask customers, what a ton means? And they'll go, no, not really. You guys say that all the time, but I don't know what it is. And so you can explain it to them. I can point them to the video and say, yeah, I'll send you a video on it. Or what SEER is, I'll send you a video on it. And we start talking acronyms and doing all that stuff, and it just goes right over the customer's head. So what they hear, though, is with a system that I want it to be bigger because my other one didn't cool properly. Okay. And that's what guys try to fill that blank and go, yes, let's make it a bigger system. And the customer's all for that because that's going to make it cool better. But what the customer doesn't understand is it doesn't do that. And so I try to explain to them by saying, look, I could put a 4-ton on this system and it's a 3-ton currently. It's not going to work. It's not going to work because I can't fit 4 tons of air through 3 tons of ductwork. Think of it this way. I have a 5-pound bag of potato sack. I can only fit 5 pounds of potatoes in that sack. I can't put 10. Same thing with the air conditioner. I can't do it. It's not going to work. We have to modify everything. Now that it's going to go up in price. Why don't we size your system to the house and then fix some of the problems, and maybe we can make it smaller. A lot of times they still don't want to change size. They'll go, no, I want a 3-ton. I'm not, or 4-ton, whatever it is. And I'm not opposed to doing that for customers because of the variable speed today. The thing is, if it's way oversized, I will bring it up to them and say, no, this system's oversized. Once I get to do the testing in the house, and once they find out that it's actually free from us, it's a no-brainer, and usually I close most of those sales because I come in and they see us do the testing that nobody else is doing. And by the way, with that QB2 program, the Quality HVAC Residential Services program, I could go give the quote, do all the testing. Another company can go give the quote, do all the testing. And another company could go give the quote and do all the testing. And all 3 of those guys would get paid the $700. They have $4 million left in the program that they want to get rid of before the end of 26. And at $700 a pop, that's not a lot. Oh, by the way, there's a test out that they do. They have a tier 1 and tier 2 quality install testing. The tier 2 gives me $1,000. So, and we're actually a tier 3 contractor for that too. So, because we grandfathered in, you have to do so many tests, tier 1s, and then they let you do the tier 2s because we've been doing it forever. So they allowed us to do it. They said, switching back to energy here in California. So California is unique. We have some of the most expensive rates. When I switched to heat pumps, my heat pump switch was forced on me because I remember I said we had a bad rep. Heat pumps had a bad rep in this area. But heat pumps were forced on me because of ultra low NOx furnaces. I hate them. They're junk. I wouldn't put one of those in my house, okay? And I was trying to sell customers on another way the other path was heat pumps. We had to switch into heat pumps. Heat pumps are, at the time, this was in 2019, when we were forced to do it, it was cheaper to do a heat pump to run a heat pump than it is to run a gas furnace. It's just simple math. We can make, because of this efficiency of a heat pump, the COP, we're able to get more BTUs for a kilowatt hour rate than we can with the therms. It actually comes out where it's much more efficient and it costs less to run. That has flipped in PG&E territory. In PG&E territory, it's actually more expensive to run a heat pump than it is a gas furnace. The variable on that is if the customer has solar, it's a no-brainer to do the heat pump. It's going to cost them less. If they have gas furnaces, they want to go gas furnace, you can still do dual fuel, on which we can. The incentives in California is also geared toward electrification. They want you to do heat pumps. They don't give you any incentive. It's a dual fuel usually. You can still get the federal tax credit, the 25C, for doing that, but that you can't get some of the utility stuff money or some of the money through tech program. Tech is technology and equipment for clean heating, which is, again, I think some of that also comes from cap and trade money. And they just ran out of money last week or 2 weeks ago. They ran out of money. It'll go for about 6 months and then they'll run out of money. They won't get it for another 6-8 months and then they'll run out of money. But we're pretty good incentives. $1,500 for a system, and they were giving up to $3,000 for a water heater if you're going to heat pump water heater.
So with the flip where the operational cost of a heat pump is now more expensive than the gas furnace, what is your strategy there? Because obviously there's other benefits to heat pumps beyond the operational cost.
Ultra low NOx.
Yeah.
I don't want to put an ultra low NOx in your house, and I have to put an ultra low NOx. So I'm still pushing toward the heat pumps. The guy that we just did he wanted to go dual fuel, but guess what? I've locked out his gas furnace down to 27 degrees because that's what his balance point is in the house. So there's no reason to run it until it gets there. I've refined that now to where it was just basically, now I do BCOP, break even COP. That's in Manual S. At the HVAC NCI Summit, I went ahead and I did a presentation and I did a spreadsheet at the presentation. Do you want me to bring it up for you guys? You want me to share it?
Sure.
If you got it handy, yeah.
Yeah. So let me bring it up. Let's see. This is BCOP. This is the BCOP that I had right here. So on it, I built it so that it depended on the state. So let's just say, what state do you live in? Maine, Eric?
I'm in Maine, yep.
Yeah, so let's go to Maine. So if we look up Maine, in Maine, this is based on averages, so for the state. So I didn't have one for Maine, darn it. So there must have been some missing information. Let me go to Kansas.
Do Massachusetts? That's me.
Yeah, we can do Massachusetts, though. Let's do Massachusetts. So here's Massachusetts.
There we go.
So if you have a 96% efficient furnace, the break-even COP, if the COP drops below 3.45, then you should be switching to a gas furnace. Does that make sense?
Yep.
In other words, if it was LP, the BCOP can be, as long as it's above 2.22, it's cheaper to run a heat pump than it is to run LP. And if it's oil, $2.50, BCOP is 2.52. So the break-even COP, now it depends on the furnace. So let's say if we change this to like an 86%, an 82% furnace, the BCOP drops.
Yeah.
So
this makes complete sense, and it's why Massachusetts just rolled out a heat pump electricity rate, which I am literally it's on my to-do list to do before Thanksgiving because I run complete heat pumps. Electricity is very expensive in Massachusetts, and that is going to save me a lot in January and February. And why they had to do this because the break-even, the BCOP, was not very good for Massachusetts, even though they're pushing heat pumps substantially.
Yeah. So here, let me show you. I'm in MID territory, so let me go up here because this is this upper part, so you can modify this for your local area and your local utilities if you have more than one utility. We have several in our area. We have MID, which is Modesto Irrigation District. So in my area right now, and then this is wintertime rates too. So this is what they drop the rate in the winter. They drop it down in the winter. It's like 21 cents in the summer, and it's 18 cents in the wintertime. And the break-even COP, as long as my unit stays above 2.30, I'm running a heat pump. And that's on a 96% efficient rate. If I made it 98%, which I can go up to, I just have to have a COP of above 2.35. It's cheaper to run the heat pump than it is the furnace. Let's switch that to PG&E. And now I have to have a 6. COP, and you tell me which heat pump hits 6 COP. It doesn't do it. That's really tough. Now,
Yeah.
the difference here is this is also based on your therms. So you can go in and this is the average. You can go in and change this for your area. But you can also go down, I think, do I have it down here lower? You can change what the natural gas rate is that you're paying per 1,000 cubic feet, because it's going to change. You change 1 week, you're paying $2 a therm, and 2 months later, you're paying $3 a therm. So that varies. That's one reason why heat pumps make more sense, because your electric rates kind of stay nice and steady. They don't jump up and down. Gas rates go up and down all the time. They can spike $3, $4 a therm and drop way down low. Now, why is natural gas is kind of expensive in California? Because we actually pipe it in, even though there are natural gas wells all over the state. Why do they pipe it in? Because the state's got so many regulations, they're shutting them down right and left. And so there's natural gas fields all over California, but they won't let them sink new wells, and they won't let them take advantage of it. So that's why our natural gas is kind of expensive. It might be cheaper in different areas. So, but you can change this. You can modify this spreadsheet, and I'll stop sharing unless you got a question about it. Did you want to see another state or?
I love this tool, Mitch. This is so helpful, and it's great for folks if they can hopefully get a chance to play around with it, because it's just an awesome learning tool that's, like you've shown, it can be tailored to a specific area. And it's particularly interesting that Ed brought up around a lot of states. Massachusetts, Maine has had a heat pump rate for a long time. Various parts of New York have a heat pump rate. There are a lot of states that are doing this in negotiations with the utilities because it makes sense for the utilities. They're getting more load growth. And then it's a very powerful incentive for heat pumps. And in my state of Maine in particular, we have relatively low cash rebate incentives for heat pumps. It's a few $1,000s relative to Massachusetts. It's $10,000 for a whole home retrofit. But in Maine, we have a heat pump rate where it's 21 cents a kilowatt hour for a standard residential electricity rate. But in the wintertime, on the heat pump rate, it drops down to around 11 cents. So it's fantastic incentive for growing number of parts of the country. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing to look at. And then also to remind folks, that model is fantastic. You can see exactly where that BCOP is for a given scenario. But also it's important you can look and see, how many hours a year are you actually below that BCOP? And so if you have a scenario where it might be like 20 hours a year, 40 hours a year, even 100 hours a year, you're not really going to care. And it wouldn't make sense to bother with a dual fuel system, right?
This flips back to the reason why I do load calcs, because when I do a load calc,
Yep.
I look at the bin data too. So we do houses in the mountains or in the foothills. And so a house here in the valley, typically my cooling load is the same as my heating load. So I can put a 3-ton unit in and the 3-ton heat pump that will handle the heat load fine. And with the variable speed, and if they run it correctly, it's going to be fantastic for the customer. They're going to have low bills, very comfortable home, and everybody's happy. When I go into the mountains, though, there's a couple of factors. First of all, the heat load is typically going to be double. Like we just did one up in Twain Harte, which is around 5,000 feet. And they get snow. They'll have snow for 3 months up there in the wintertime, 2 months. And so they're needing 60, 70,000 heat for the same house I did in the valley, have 30,000 heat, 35,000 heat. What they end up doing is we end up going usually dual fuel. 2 reasons. With the dual fuel, when I can go with a gas furnace or LP up there, what we'll do is they're able to, when the power goes out, and it does go out up there all the time, they can run the gas furnace off a standard 120 volt generator. And they have heat they also have, usually most of those homes have backup heat, like wood heat as a backup and some other things, because the power goes out all the time. Other parts of the country have that same issue. They'll have power go out for several days, and heat pumps usually can't run off a generator unless it's sized correctly. And it does have to be variable speed if you're going to do that, or you have to put a soft start kit on it for it to work properly. So but 95% of the stuff we do here in the valley is straight heat pump. I don't do dual fuel unless the customer is just like uncomfortable. And I'll say, yeah, we can do dual fuel. I lock it out. You're not going to be using it 90% of the time. Maybe one day out of the year, because I look at my bin data. And if you look at your bin data, like if I take a house and say the house here in California, I might have 4 hours during the whole 5 hours during the whole year that it's below the actual balance point of the house in my bin data.
Right.
Which I don't know if you guys know what bin data is. I know you're shaking your head, Eric. What it is? What it is?
I know what it is because Eric says it to me about 7 times a week. So yeah. No,
Okay, so you look at your bin data, but if you're in an area like say Ohio, your bin data, you may have 800, 900, 1,200 hours that you're going to be below your balance point. And so then you have to weigh, do I need to do heat strips or does that work out? And sometimes that's what you need to do. Heat strips actually might be the best option. Or do I go dual fuel with the customer and to make them comfortable? Because what we don't want to do is give heat pumps a bad rep by putting it in and not sizing it correctly and install it correctly. Because if you want to continue electrification in the nation, there's several things we have to do it right. We have to size it correctly. We've got to make sure our ductwork is correct, and we got to make sure the house is correct. If that house is not going to, if the house is crap, you can put the best system in the world on it. It's going to be crap when it's done. That system's not going to work like it is. That's not a silver bullet, just changing over to electrification. You have to fix other things in the home.
That is an extraordinarily good place to end, I think, Mitch. Like that kind of sums up so much of the themes we talk about on this pod. So our final question is always advice. So if there's a contractor listening who's interested in moving towards performance-based work with heat pumps in homes, where should they start? What would you point them towards?
Load calculations. That was my biggest thing. When NCI wasn't doing that, when I joined them, wasn't a big deal with them. They were all about the airflow. And that is very important. And yeah, once you fix that, I've kindly convinced them. And now I guess they want to partner with you guys, which is great. But load calculations, because if you're not doing a load calculation, you're just guessing. Their whole thing is if you're not measuring, you're just guessing. Well, if I don't do a load calculation, I'm just guessing. Rule of thumbs work probably about 50% of the time, and it will be fine. You'll size it correctly. But I do a load calculation because I'm the one that's got to live with it after you have it. I'm the one that's saddled with that system for the next 10 years. You're going to be calling me when it's not working right. And I want to be able to sleep at night. I want to be able to, I don't want that text at 4, 6 o'clock. And I don't hide my phone number. My phone numbers, I give it to the customer. And so when I get a text at 6:30, yes, if he would have had a problem, I would have had a tech out there or I would have gone out there myself. So doing load calcs, that's would be the main thing. The next step in performance contracting is start measuring things. Simple as static pressures. Take a static on every system you're doing. If it's over an inch of static, you have a problem. Now that's based on the system. I want to show you one real quick. I'll just bring it up. And because I just did it yesterday. And this was that guy's system right there. That was with the True Flow grid. So I don't know. Can you see? Is it reversed for you guys?
Yeah, no, we can see it.
We're red in total external static pressure, and we're terrible red in the airflow.
Airflow, yeah. He had a 5-ton unit. He had over 1 inch of static, and he's got 1,000-something CFM for his airflow. 1,000 something. Let's see. I don't know if I can photo. Can you see that?
Doesn't look good.
I can't quite see the airflow. I can see the dials we're in the bad zone everywhere.
So it was 1,049 CFM. So, but this guy, I showed him this while I was on the job because I was out there yesterday afternoon doing his stuff, and it just kind of went over his head. Okay. But I still got to do the load calc on his house. And I know that's all he's getting. He's getting 2.5 tons of cooling out of the unit. And it just drives me nuts that the other company that did it, and I'll say their name, Integrity Heating and Air. There you go. You put in the wrong size unit, guy. So you change that unit out. This is stupid. These people do some of the dumbest things. And again, I think he oversized it. He put a 5-ton in. It probably had a 4-ton beforehand. And that was probably oversized to begin with. So I don't know. I still got to do the load count, and I'll find out what it is. He had a lot of infiltration. The infiltration was, his CFM 50 was 6,000.
Whoa.
That's serious.
Whoa. Yeah, for that size of house. Yeah,
Yeah.
So, wow. When I see that kind of stuff, what was this CFM? Yeah, it was, it was 4929. I'm sorry. 4929.
Still pretty bad.
4929. So,
yeah.
So his CFM 50. It's not good. That's still bad. He's still going to have 8 to 12 air changes per hour when I get it all put in. So
Yeah, that's a lot.
now, does Amply do? You got an infiltration number you can plug in there, right?
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. You can put a
do-
CFM50
blower
right
door
in.
CFM50. You just stick it in. Yeah,
Yep.
because I do
Yeah,
blower door and everything. Yeah.
Totally.
That's great.
I also do a tool class for PG&E. PG&E has a tool lending library here in California. So you can borrow blower door, duct blasters, flow hoods, true flow grid, smart probes, all kinds of recording devices for recording systems, the voltages, temperatures and stuff in the house. You can borrow all that for free for 2 weeks from them, and sometimes longer if you want. And they have FLIR cameras you can borrow from them. They have a bunch of tools that are free to use. Doesn't cost. Oh, they'll even loan you an induction stove if you want to try one. So it's countertop induction stove. So they have a tool lending library. So does Southern California Edison has a tool lending library. So contractors and their techs can borrow those tools and use them. I tell people the first house you should ever do is test your own home. Just take these tools, go test your own home. Because I teach a tool class for PG&E several times a year, and we bring in techs and contractors and show them how to use these tools, the blower door. In fact, you can't borrow the blower door unless you take my class or you're NGAT or BPI trained. So, because it's a hazard, because we don't want to burn a house down because of fireplace, because we got to go through all the safety stuff before we're doing that.
Right.
So
That is a great tangible tactical rec for folks who are in your area, but also this sort of thing exists in other states too. So, Mitch, thank you so much for spending the time with us and joining us on the Heat Pump Podcast.
Okay. Well, I hope you got something out of it. So
Oh yeah,
It was
You
super
can
fun.
use.
It was great, Mitch. Yeah.
you did great.
Thanks for listening to the Heat Pump Podcast. It is a production of Amply Energy. And just a reminder that the opinions voiced were those of our guests or us, depending on who was talking. If you like what you've heard and haven't subscribed, please subscribe in your favorite podcast platform. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to reach out. You can reach us once again at hello@amply.energy, no.com, just .energy.